Today's Toy Spot, we are having a look at the Diamond Select Toys Marvel Selects Destroyer Special Collector's Edition action figure. Spot found this at his comic book store. No, not his local comic book store. I found this at another comic book store that was actually on the way home from work, grown-up work. I was driving down the street and I saw a comic book store. I didn't realize it was even there. I went in, nice enough fellow right there, and checking out his wares. As a collector, you know, you would go into the store and you kind of look at all the stuff that's going on there, and found this guy. Yippee Yippee. Yippee Yippee Peanut Butter Skippy. I didn't realize this guy was even out yet. And so, very, very cool to pick this guy up. Comes with Odin's sword, comes with Odin's head, a levitating head in the meantime because we haven't added it yet to the body. Package-wise, it's your regular fare from the folks over at Diamond Select with some nice artwork down at the bottom corner featuring Destroyer. Side of the box also has some nice artwork on Destroyer. Very nice. And the back of the package shows you Destroyer with the Odin sword in hand, shows you the alternate Odin's head. Be on the lookout also of some re-released figures. This is the re-released Thor and Savage Hulk, if you didn't get a chance to pick those up before. Aw, shucks! That's okay, you can pick them up now. When the Celestials threatened the destruction of Earth, Odin, the All-Father of Asgard, created the Destroyer armor. Once it was inhabited by the spirit of a sentient being, it embarks on its mission to destroy. Powerful beings can amplify its strength 1,000-fold, but only powerful minds can guide it in less destructive tasks. Although it was once fulfill its tasks of facing the celestial hosts, it was defeated. The Destroyer armor has far more often been used against Asgardians and humans. Loki has dispatched the Destroyer against his brother Thor. Thor has physically worn the armor to take on Hela, Queen of the Hell, and Odin himself donned the armor to battle his son Thor, wielding the Odin's sword in the brutal contest. This 7-inch scale Marvel Select action figure of the Destroyer features approximately 16 points of articulation and includes the Odin sword as well as an interchangeable head of Odin. There you go, boom, boom. Sculpted by Jean Saint Jean. Of course, also, if you want to check out more from the folks over at Diamond Select Toys, it's as easy as going to www.diamondselecttoys.com. Bingo bango. That's packaging aside. Spot's going to take a break and get this opened up. When we come back, we're going to get a better look at the Marvel Select Destroyer. There's more heading away, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Accessories to come included with Destroyer. He comes with Odin's sword, which, let's get a close look at this. What a beautiful sculpted hilt. The little curves and sculpted in almost scroll work to the hilt is beautiful. It's one of the finest looking accessories I've seen from a standpoint of something that the character or figure in this case is going to be holding. It looks also as if they've put a darker, maybe a secondary coat that's filled in some of the little recessed areas, making this scroll work really stand out on the hilt. Beautiful work though. The blade sadly doesn't have as much going on for it. It's primarily just painted in silver. Maybe something a little extra could have gone to it, maybe just a little bit of a darker, almost in the same vein that what they've done with the Destroyer, where you can see all these little additional nuances of the darker gray. If they had incorporated that somehow, maybe to the center portion of the blade, just to kind of break up a very primary silver, would have gone a long way. But a beautiful sword nonetheless. The sword can be wielded in either hand of the Destroyer, although to get it into the Destroyer's hand, a lot of doing this. You have to squeak and creak, get it into the hand though. It works perfectly fine, but sounds like you're almost tickling like a Teletubby to get that sword into his hand. That's the quote of the review, tickle a Teletubby. But you can see it actually fits in his hand very, very easily. No issues whatsoever other than just trying to get that into the hand. There we go, and put that to the side. The other thing that comes included with Destroyer is Odin's head. I love when we can get interchangeable heads incorporated and included with figures. It certainly, also from a good advertising standpoint, it markets the fact that you can get another one of these figures if you want to have the figure displayed in both options. Clever, but very effective also as well. The sculpt on Odin's head is quite good. Again, they've added an additional wash to the hair, so it's not just primarily this light gray color. There's a little bit of the nuances there of the darker gray, kind of in the areas in between the fibers of, or what they probably could have done, and I'm sure what they ended up doing was that the hair is a darker gray, and then they've just washed just like a lighter, almost white gray over top of it, so that the gray area actually is what sits inside the sunken areas of the hair. Very effective, very good sculpt though on the head. Quite nice. It's not my default look though. I probably will keep the armored head on Destroyer for display purposes, but I do really like the fact that they incorporated a secondary head to boot. Taking off the head is extremely easy. It's one of the easiest head changes I've seen on a Marvel Select figure. Probably due, thankfully, to the very large creviced, very large open socket on the bottom there. The only thing I would say is, as you're taking the head off, be careful of this piece here. It is glued, it's affixed to the head, it's not going to come off. However, if you are grabbing the head by this, making sure that you don't obviously pop that off, then we can go ahead and replace it with Odin's head. Odin's head of the two heads is a little more difficult to get into place. You do have to apply a little bit more pressure, but bingo bango, there you've got Odin featuring the Destroyer armor. Beautiful look. Again, I probably would go more so for this look, but again, opinions will vary. Okay, so let's go ahead and take the Odin's head off again. Put the Destroyer's head back on. Same idea though, putting pressure on the head, making sure you're not putting anything on the crest, because the crest, you would not want that breaking off. We get very few, I guess that's not 100% true. When we do get large Marvel Select figures, I really do appreciate it. We do still get them, I mean, in the likes of Juggernauts, the Thanos, and other figures of that nature. But sometimes when you get smaller figures for a run period of time, it's so refreshing to get a good meaty figure. That's one thing Diamond Select does very well. Meaty figures well worth the value. Now you scale this figure, say, versus against a Marvel Legends release. A Marvel Legends figure could cost you about $25. A Marvel Select figure could cost you closer to $30. But you get your money's worth. I mean, look at the beefy size of Destroyer here. The spikes running down the arms as well as down the legs. One thing I actually find though is some of the spikes, while they don't feel prickly, running your hand along them a little bit though, you do feel a little bit of, just a little bit of not like apprehension, but it does feel a little on the prickly side, especially if you pick up the figure by its mid-torso. Like these little side spikes seem the sharpest of the ones running down the body. Again, you're not gonna draw blood or anything like that, but like picking it up, it's a little jarring at times, some of the spikes that are on him. Paint though very simplistic in the silvers. One thing that they did do though was they went in with a darker wash, and not only did they wash areas around the muscle portions of the figure, but they also ran that similar dark coloring around the riveted areas of the armor. So basically everything that you're looking at when it comes to not only the front area, a little bit of shading on the top there, but like all the areas around the spikes seem that it brings the spikes forward because they've added the little darker paint around them. Very, very effective. He also has the additional lines running across his armor in the same vein as the Colossus, like a Colossus Marvel Select figure that we've looked at before. There's the underside treads of his feet, nice and flat. No peg holes though, not to say that you have any issues standing him. He stands perfectly fine. Now he's a little bit more limited in the way of his posability, just by sheer virtue of the size of the figure. But even despite the fact he only has 16 points of articulation, he has it everywhere where he would need to have it. You know what, before we do that, before we get to his posability, I want to focus a little effort on the head. We looked at Odin's head, but I feel like we didn't give nearly enough attention to his default head. which again has that darker shading. I'm so glad that they incorporated that shading right around this area, because it really adds depth to the head sculpt as opposed to giving it just a primary silver. By comparing, if I was to compare this to a potential Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure, a Build-A-Figure I think of Destroyer here would have resorted only to using grays and silvers, and I don't feel as if would have had as much care and love to add that additional darker color. So that goes really a long way for me. Now when it comes to his posability, let's run through this together. His head does rotate all the way around by virtue of the fact that the head is on a ball joint. Head sits up quite high. Only goes to about a mid-leveled point. It won't go any further, just obviously because of where the chin is located. The shoulders hinge out, and almost similar to a Iron Man figure, these little portions here are ball jointed, so they can move, not only can they move back and forth, but they also do a good job of staying out of the way when you want to move the arms. The arms can move to about there. I mean, you can move them all the way up as well, but I wouldn't want to jeopardize these popping off just by virtue of me wanting to give him, a hip hip hooray pose sort of thing. He does have a swivel on the bicep portion. I say he, but it, I suppose, has a swivel point on its bicep. A single hinge in the elbow. This is kind of where it gets a little bit more limited, but perfectly fine for me by sheer virtue of the fact that the figure is just as cool as it is. Rotation in the hand, and also additionally to that, he has the hinge back and forth on the wrist portion. An upper torso ball joint goes a long way as well. You could technically rotate it all the way around if you want. He has a split leg, only goes to about there, so really not too much, but again, enough where you need it. A forward and back motion on the leg, stops sadly at the leveled point, basically just right at the level point of the back, it stops there. It doesn't really go any further than that. Single hinge on the knee, a hinge on the foot, and no ankle pivot. I mean, the foot rotates on an angle, but it does not seem to have an ankle pivot. You know, if you slightly just kind of curve it, I guess that will work as favoring a ankle pivot, but it doesn't really seem to have an actual ankle pivot portion. Love this figure. Absolutely love him. I would almost feel as if I would have loved him less just because he doesn't have as much paint going on to him. I guess his design is a little bit more scaled back, but they incorporate the spikes, they've sculpted in well, additional paint around the spikes, bring those spikes forward. And he's a good example, not maybe to the sizing of an Abomination or a Juggernaut or figures of that nature, but for his size, he really warrants his price. And that's one thing that I continue to praise Diamond Select for, is while you've got other companies using pre-existing molds, reusing those molds to their heart's content, just swapping out heads, changing out paint, and charging $25 a figure to $30 a figure, sometimes it's $25 to $28 depending on where you're finding it here, especially in Canada. A Marvel Select figure, on the other hand, usually always has unique sculpts, unless they're making use of an existing sculpt like an Iron Man to a different variation of an Iron Man, for example. But generally, they always use different molds. A different mold such as this, you pick up this figure, it feels quality, it feels like it's a good, meaty figure. And that's one thing Spot always loves picking up at his comic book stores, big, meaty figures. It becomes a little bit more difficult when you're asking that at the guy at the counter. Do you have any new meaty figures? He kind of will, I'm sure he'll look at you like you're a little strange. Needless to say, a good figure nonetheless. If you're a fan of Thor, definitely would add this guy to your collection if you can find him. Today's Toy Spot, we were having a look at the Marvel Select. This was the Destroyer figure. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more Toy Spots heading your way. That's true. That is true. Thanks for watching. See you next time.